This landmark study, in combination with the other writings, The Edge of the Sea and Silent Spring, led Rachel Carson to become an advocate on behalf of this nation's vast coastal habitat and wildlife that depends on it. Her legacy lives on today at the refuge that bears her name and is dedicated to the permanent protection of the salt marshes and estuaries of southern Maine coast. The refuge was established in 1966 to preserve migratory bird habitat, waterfowl migration along southern Maine's coastal estuaries. There's 11 refuge divisions in 12 municipalities protecting approximately 5,600 acres within 14,800 acre acquisition zone. I've been on the board of the Friends group since 1989. The organization was founded in 1987. We're a small group with a history of communicating with our Maine congressional members, who are missing our representative right now, Shelley, for decades. In the past, we sent letters via U.S. mail. Then anthrax forced us to fax our letters. Then the electronic age made things very simple, email and PDFs. The Friends play an important role in supporting the Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge mission. We work to educate Maine's U.S. congressional and state legislation about the relevance of the refuge wildlife habitat, its coastal resilience, tourism benefits, and the use for future generations. We support refuge staff by volunteering with trail maintenance, greenhouse activities, administrative work, and visitor services. We engage the towns and communities that surround the refuge through mailings, meetings, events, and a future conservation-themed book group. We fundraise and apply for grants so that we can assist with hiring refuge interns, purchase equipment, and support research projects. We support acquisition funding and refuge operation and engage in environmental education and outreach programs. National Wildlife Refuges protect habitat for a host of wildlife species, while also offering storm surge protection, improving water quality, supporting nurseries for commercially important fish and shellfish, providing recreation opportunities for local refuge communities. Each one of you have a National Wildlife Refuge in your home state and maybe even one close to your home. I request, number one, an overall FY21 funding level of $586 million for the operations and maintenance budget of the National Wildlife Refuge System managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. All the refuges are in dire need of staffing and upkeep. Without increased funding for refugees, wildlife conservation and public recreation opportunities will be jeopardized. Every dollar appropriated for the refuge system returns an average of 4.87 to local economies. Number two, I request to appropriate $283 million for the wildlife and habitat management projects within the O&M budget. These monies will support restoration of salt marshes, removal and controlling invasive species, recovering rare species, continued fire management programs, restoring cultivated land to its original habitat, implementing climate change strategies of adaptation, mitigation, and engagement. Number three, I request $41 million for refuge land acquisition projects. In addition, the Land and Water Conservation Fund needs to be permanently funded at the $900 amount annually. I've been advocating this for over 2 decades to Congress, and we finally have LWCF permanently authorized, but now to have the amount permanently funded at $900. As you know, there's H.R. 3195, the Land and Water Conservation Fund for Permanent Funding Act is pending, and we all need your continued support. This year marks the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and we thank Rachel Carson for inspiring us all. I leave you with a quote from Rachel's book, A Sense of Wonder. A child's world is fresh and new and beautiful, full of wonder and excitement. Each of the National Wildlife Refuges have a unique story and history behind the name, but they basically all serve one purpose: protect wildlife habitat. With that wonder and excitement, I thank you again for the opportunity to present my testimony in support of our National Wildlife Refuges.
Thank you. You stuck the landing. Mr. Hall.
Good afternoon, Representative Kilmer, Ranking Member Joyce. It's on. The light's on.
Okay.
I just need to be louder. I can do that. My name is Justin Hall. I'm the current president of the Friends of the Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge Complex, and I appreciate the invitation to testify today on behalf of the Friends. So our Friends group was formed in 1999 to promote the conservation of the natural and cultural resources of the refuge complex and engage in educational, charitable, scientific, and civic activities that will increase public awareness and assist management in accomplishing refuge goals. We provide just under $60,000 a year to support programs at the Refuge, with our primary focus being the environmental education program. The Nisqually complex is blessed with 3 very unique places. Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge was established in 1974. The creation was led by a grassroots citizens movement to aid in the protection and enhancement of the Nisqually River Delta. In 2009, the refuge accomplished the largest estuary restoration on the West Coast when 762 acres of dike habitat was converted back to salt marsh and tidal estuary, essential rearing grounds for the threatened Puget Sound Chinook salmon. Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually is an urban refuge located between the cities of Olympia and Tacoma, and just an hour and a half from Seattle and 2 hours from Portland. The refuge receives over 220,000 visitors a year, and over 10,000 students and teachers participate in the environmental education program. The Black River unit of Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually protects a unique freshwater floodplain that is also critical habitat for the federally threatened Oregon spotted frog. The Black River unit is not open to the public at this time because of lack of funds to develop and staff it for visitors. Grays Harbor National Wildlife Refuge was established in 1988. The highlight of Grays Harbor is the 100,000 shorebirds that stop over during the spring migration. The refuge is open to the public, where visitors can view large flocks on the 1-mile boardwalk extending into the salt marsh. Over 12,000 people visit annually, mostly in the spring. Partnership between Grays Harbor National Wildlife Refuge, Grays Harbor Audubon Society, and the City of Hoquiam puts on the Grays Harbor Shorebird and Nature Festival during the peak spring migration the last weekend of April or the first weekend of May. The 3-day festival brings in more than 1,400 visitors. The Grays Harbor Hoquiam Aberdeen area is economically depressed, and one of the purposes of the annual festival is to increase ecotourism and help the local communities. However, an annual festival only provides short-term benefits. Grays Harbor has the potential to be a mainstay in the community and a destination for visitors if an interpretive center, prioritized by Congress but not funded, was supported for construction with an annual budget for staffing, operations, and maintenance. The biggest challenge at the Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge complex is adequate funding for staff. Currently, 7 permanent employees manage over 11,000 acres of land, with the Black River unit 40 minutes from the main office and Grays Harbor Refuge an hour and a half away. The complex has 1 maintenance worker to maintain the infrastructure and assist with habitat management, yet a large amount of the time is spent commuting between these work sites. Ideally, the complex needs 15 staff members to achieve the full purpose of the refuges, not only to benefit fish and wildlife, but also to provide quality, safe outdoor opportunities for the public. This is a common limitation for many other refuges. Law enforcement is also a significant issue for our complex. Currently, we have 1/4 of our refuge law enforcement officer for all 3 of our locations. The officer is housed 2 hours away in Sequim at the Washington Maritime National Wildlife Refuge Complex. Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually is located directly off of Interstate 5, the major corridor between Seattle and Portland. This close proximity and easy exit and entrance onto the highway may be the reason why there is higher crime at Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually, particularly car prowls. Trespassing into closed areas set aside for wildlife and engaging in non-wildlife dependent activities are also big problems, despite miles of trails throughout the refuge. For example, portrait photographers disturbing birds so their subjects can sit in the grasslands, dog walking on the refuge, and fishing and hunting in closed areas. A full-time law enforcement presence on the refuges is needed to curb abuses and to provide education to those unaware of the rules and regulations and the reasons why they are in place. Additionally, a security surveillance system for the parking lot would go a long way towards reducing the problem with car prowls. The education program at the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually is incredible and is a direction for the future focus of this urban refuge. The refuge is a popular regional destination, especially on clear Pacific Northwest days, and regularly exceeds its visitation capacity due to current resource limitations. This is also true for the education program, which serves a remarkable 10,000 students each year, but is facing growing demand from school districts and staff and teachers. With additional staff, the program can be expanded to provide environmental education outreach within the communities and then follow-up visits to the refuge. We want to help create the next generation of people who actively take care of our nation's lands. As it is now, our friends group and volunteers are picking up the slack and smoothing out the inconsistencies in the funding to the best of our ability. However, volunteers and outside staff are not a sustainable model for our refuge system. We support the request that the subcommittee allocate $586 million in funding for the refuge system operations and maintenance fund for fiscal year 2021. This increase would greatly impact our refuge. The Nisqually National Wildlife Refuge Complex would be better able to hire the staff needed to have an adequate level of law enforcement, increase our urban refuge outreach, control invasive species to benefit a diversity of fish and wildlife, restore critical habitat for Oregon spotted frog, construct and operate the promised interpretive center at Grays Harbor National Wildlife Refuge, provide additional wildlife-dependent opportunities at Grays Harbor National Wildlife Refuge and the Black River Unit, and further build out our environmental education programs. Our refuges are the face of public lands for many people in the South Puget Sound community, as they are for communities across the country. We need adequate funding to ensure that they stay protected, accessible, and stewarded for the generations to come. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Is it Brouwer?
Brouwer, yes.
Or Ms. Brouwer.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Carolyn Brouwer, and I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for the National Wildlife Refuge Association. I very much appreciate the invitation to testify today on behalf of the National Wildlife Refuge Association and our members and supporters, particularly the Friends groups who do such amazing work on the ground. Joined today by Justin and Bill, and we're thrilled to have you into town. The Refuge Association was started 45 years ago by retired refuge staff who wanted to start a group to advocate on behalf of the National Wildlife Refuge System. Today, the refuge system consists of 568 refuge units across 850 million acres, which is roughly the size of India. Refuges are on all 50 states and in 5 marine national monuments in the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. Today, I want to talk to you about what the refuge system has been able to do with the recent increases. There was an increase of $14 million in the budget this past year in 2020. With the $2.9 million increase included in the budget for law enforcement, the refuge system has hired 43 new federal wildlife officers. Last year when I testified, I stated that 13 states have 0 or 1 officer. With these recent hires, this is no longer the case, and we are anticipating law enforcement staffing to increase, especially in the states that have been particularly neglected recently. Another place that will receive more officers is border refuges. For several years, the Fish and Wildlife Service has moved nearly all of their officers on a rotating schedule down to the border for 21-day details. With these new hires, we expect these detailees to be discontinued, which will allow these officers to stay at their home refuge. With additional funding in the upcoming appropriations bill, the refuge system is planning on hiring an additional 12 officers, which will raise levels of staffing in law enforcement to a new recent high. Current law enforcement funding is $41 million, and our goal is $70 million. Another positive outcome in the FY20 bill was additional funding on invasive species. The Fish and Wildlife Service is facing serious impacts on nearly every wildlife refuge, with 2.4 million acres infested with invasive plants. I'm sure all of you will recognize names like Phragmites, kudzu, and saltcedar. There are also 1,749 invasive animal populations, which includes everything from mice and rats on the Pacific atolls and islands to feral hogs, quagga mussels, pythons, and Asian carp. To show the impact of funding eradication efforts, one great example is nutria in the Chesapeake Bay. Nutria are a rat species that are roughly 14 pounds on average, which is larger than my cat. They are extremely destructive to wetland habitats. For several years, there has been a substantial amount of money put towards eradicating nutria in the Chesapeake Bay. There's been a lot of people, they have a team of dogs, lots of money and focus. This is about the 5th year with no nutria sightings, so perhaps this next year nutria will be considered eradicated in that area. There's also been a new effort to create an invasive species strike teams. There was $2.5 million for this in the FY20 bill, which is enough for 5 new teams, bringing the number up to 12. Their goals are early detection and rapid response. One species that is a prime target for the strike teams are mice on Midway Atoll. These mice are literally eating the albatross alive as they sit in their nests, and it is a gruesome sight. And I'm told that at dusk, you can see the ground moving. There are so many mice there. I want to thank you for your support of funding for the refuge system and for that overall $14 million increase in the 2020 bill. The system needs another boost of funding this next year. Funding is now $1 million lower than the height of funding in 2010, and FY10 funding of $503 million after calculating for inflation would be $598 million now. This means that the refuge system has had to absorb $94 million in cuts over the last 10 years. As a result, the system has lost 1/7 of its staff. Acres needing prescribed burns are left untouched. Half of refuge units are unstaffed. Law enforcement funding, even with recent increases, is at about 25% of full staffing. Many refuges have no visitor services staff, which doesn't sound like a big deal until you see the refuges that do have these staffers, and you realize the value they add to the community in terms of bringing school kids out to refuges and teaching the community about nature in their own backyard. Anyone who's been to the Prairie Wetland Learning Center in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, knows the value of hands-on nature for kids. This is what visitor services staff does. Just imagine if we could replicate centers like that all over the country. Refuges are currently funded at 59 cents an acre. Parks, in comparison, and I agree we're talking about apples and oranges, but parks are funded at $30 an acre. Our goal for over a decade now has been to get refuge funding up to $900 million, which would still be barely $1 per acre. We are asking your subcommittee to include $586 million in the FY 2021 appropriations bill. Thank you very much, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Leinbach. I think so, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Great. We love pictures. Thank you. I'll pass them down. Thank you. For now, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Good afternoon, Ranking Member Joyce and Mr. Kilmer, and anyone else who's listening in the room. It's a lovely afternoon if you're a duck. I am the Executive Director of the Urban Ecology Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm super grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. The purpose of this testimony is to introduce the Interior and Environment Subcommittee to a replicable nonprofit model for urban revitalization. The Urban Ecology Center, the UEC, uses environmental education as a tool to transform challenged urban parks and neighborhoods, and our work is capturing the attention of cities across the country. The UEC started as an experimental social invention based on research that states if one has consistent access to nature from an early age, while having a mentor in your life who demonstrates respectful behavior toward the land, that person is very likely to grow up caring for and working for the environment. That is the kind of person we need right now in the world. Our mission then is quite simple: to connect people who live in cities to nature and each other. The center began in the mid-90s as a small group of teachers in a humble trailer in a high-crime park in one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in our state. We started offering field trips to nearby schools and quickly discovered that what we were offering was needed. Nature-based recreation and education is beneficial in every major way: intellectual, emotional, social, spiritual, and physical. Our trailer became a hive of community activity for adults and kids. Our success allowed us to grow, and we now are in 3 beautiful green-built and rehab buildings that bustle with community activities on Milwaukee's south, west, and east side. While the center began as a strategy to improve ecological literacy of folks in a city, we discovered that when a UEC is placed in an urban park, so much more happens. The park becomes safe, student academic achievement improves, new jobs are created, volunteerism explodes, and if done correctly, a significant influx of community resources flow into the park and nearby surroundings. The center has catalyzed over $45 million in direct investments in and near the parks that we occupy. What once was blighted, even dangerous green space becomes a safe, anchoring community asset. Last year, we hosted over 220,000 visits by youth and adults at our 3 branches in Milwaukee. 3,500 volunteers helped us plant over 10,000 native trees and plants on the 70-plus acres that we now manage. We partner with 63 urban schools, providing 35,000 students with regular field trips. We reach an incredibly diverse audience. All ages, racial, political, and economic backgrounds come together at our centers. Both sides of the aisle have supported us. Today, cities all over the nation are reaching out and showing interest in replicating this model. To help facilitate, we published this book, Urban Ecology, and created a training institute around it. To date, we've had over 50 people come through our training representing 19 different cities: Columbus, Atlanta, Rochester, and Denver, to name a few. We've had cities from different countries as well. 20 years after our inception, the program is flourishing to such a degree that it was suggested that it was important for you, who are charged with governance of this nation, to be aware of our existence and the transferable impacts we are having. I am deeply honored that you accepted our testimony to speak to you today, and have hopes that you and any listening might be able to assist us in finding additional partnerships and funding opportunities to help accelerate the spread of our important program. Worth noting, we have worked with the U.S. Forest Service in creating a 40-acre children's forest and arboretum out of remediated industrial land. And we are also grateful to receive nearly $1 million of funding from the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, the first year of its inception, to help remediate a Tier 1 tributary into Lake Michigan. Thank you. Congratulations, by the way, on passing the reauthorization bill for the GLRI just yesterday, I believe, right? Well done. Some of you may be in Milwaukee this July for the Democratic National Convention. Come visit. We'd love to show you around. And if you happen to know of anybody looking for a unique venue for their meeting or event, please contact us. We have really cool facilities, these ultra-green facilities. I know, as you, Ranking Member Joyce, that the freshwater bodies in our region aren't merely good lakes, they're great lakes. Accordingly, I don't know if I'm allowed, but I've brought you each a Petoskey stone, a polished, fossilized ancient stone found only on Lake Michigan as a gift from the lake. I actually have enough that folks in the room can have them as well. And there's no real value to these except for the beauty. So I think it's okay for me to give them. It's not like a
People
bribe or
frequently
anything.
throw rocks at us, so it's cool. Yeah, we're good. We're good. Thank you. Thank you.
These are quite beautiful. So take one, pass it along. Make sure you get one. You're doing the hard work. I'd like Tyler to get one because he helped me out early. And then anybody else in the room until they're gone. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have about our mission and our work.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. This got Oprah real quick. You get a rock, and you get a rock. Mr. Joyce, do you have any questions?
No, I want to thank you all for being here, and I appreciate all the hard work you do, and hopefully we can all continue to work together for a better planet.
I'd like to thank each of you for your testimony. I've been trying to get David Joyce to come to the Democratic Convention for a long time now, so thank you.
I got to Washington. That was
Yeah,
good.
there you go. Yeah, that was nice. That was nice. I actually did want to just make maybe a comment and a question to Justin. Thank you for mentioning some extraordinary refuges in our neck of the woods. The Billy Frank Jr. Refuge is really incredible and is appropriately named after someone who was a real champion for tribal justice and for environmental justice. And I know that the work of that refuge is designed to sort of live up to that mission. I'm also really grateful that you mentioned Gray's Harbor and the Shorebird Festival. I would encourage anyone who's watching on C-SPAN 8 to come visit Gray's Harbor County. And it really is an extraordinary refuge, the Shorebird Festival. So I got to bring I've got two daughters. When my oldest daughter was quite young, she was a total birder. She was very unusual. Most kids would read Dr. Seuss, and she would read like a book on birds. And at night, rather than reading Dr. Seuss, she'd be like, the yellow-breasted warbler, lives in shrubs and trees and migrates in the fall, right? It was a very unusual childhood for her. But I took her to the Shorebird Festival, and it was so cool to see her just sort of connect with nature. And the only connection I'd seen prior to that was Angry Birds. It was about as close as she got to connecting. And so I appreciate you mentioning that. I want to ask you, in light of these unique assets, so if there was additional base funding, talk about how that could build capacity for connecting with communities, connecting with youth. You mentioned a couple of examples, but I just want to make sure we hear the message loud and clear from you.
You bet. So most of the education comes out of the Billy Frank Jr. Nisqually, and we actually have a partnership between the Friends Group, the Refuge, some amount of their base funding, and another nonprofit, the Nisqually River Foundation, that provides a staff member in order to do that. And then we have a couple of AmeriCorps, one that works Gray's Harbor and one that works at Billy Frank Jr. As I said, we reach capacity. Our parking lots are full. People are parking on the grass, everywhere else on those occasional sunny days that we do get in the Pacific Northwest. So the way to increase the outreach and the benefit of that refuge is to get those education staff out into the schools, into the community. We also work with the Nisqually tribe with their Head Start program, getting them out, and then they learn about the refuge and what the missions are and what we're trying to do, and then they have that capstone field trip into the refuge itself. And so it really, working with Joint Base Lewis McChord, and then Pierce County Schools and Thurston County Schools and some Lewis County Schools, we're really able to extend that out. And then those people come back, the students come back with their parents, and they learn what the refuge system is for, why they're there, what the benefits are. And so really that is that next step. And the Fish and Wildlife Service had an urban refuge contest, a funding contest, which added $1 million to the base funding, which we applied for. We still have that plan ready to go. We were not successful. They only did one, I think did two. We went on for 3 years. They did 2 refuges 1 year and then 1 refuge the other 2 years. And Willamette down in our district was fortunate enough to get that. But we have those plans ready to go. And so really to extend the impact of the refuge into the community, it just requires that extra base funding in order to fully support that education program.
Terrific. I appreciate you mentioning that. And I also just want to call out the staff at both of those refuges are just really tremendous.
They're absolutely amazing people to work with.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony.
Can I offer a thought to his
Go
comment?
on. Dive in.
I was just thinking, I'm curious, in our model of an urban ecology center, it would be really great to partner with the refuges and the parks that are on the outskirts. And we have the way our model works is we actually have a fleet of buses that we own that we are able to take kids to where we need to go, which is often a stumbling block. So it'd be lovely to talk with you or anyone else again in the room, I don't know who's here, related to that type of partnership.
Super.
But the amount of money that it would require to create those urban centers is actually not very significant. So it'd be interesting to talk to somebody about that. So thanks.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you all for your testimony.